So last week I had asked about kind of experiences or emotion and understanding the differences between them. And I think you had said something about how, when you were talking about understanding, that you use the analogy of like, you know, these pieces of a puzzle, and that, you know, even if certain pieces start to maybe become clear, that you have no idea what to do with them. And then you also talked about understanding and expressing that understanding. And I guess I just wondered, is there part of understanding that remains completely unclear until some part of you somehow processes it and through learning to express it? I don't know if that makes any sense. I think it's very unclear.
I apologize for I don't really understand, but something that you said reminded me of something that happened at Hussein's gathering, and this was 1991. I had read the Meditations by René Descartes, you know, and his approach towards finding certainty by getting rid of everything that you were not sure about. So I remember Hussein, my mom's cousin, was asking me what I was doing in school, and I was, you know, kind of telling him a few things about Descartes. And then he told me, stop. I said, why? He says, let Hussein and Amir come as well, because this is really, really good. You know, it caught me by surprise, because it was the first time that he had asked me to kind of speak publicly. And by public, I mean like there were like 4 people, you know. And so I said a few things which took about 10 minutes, and Hussein was there, so I got a bit nervous. So, and I kind of just went to places that didn't make any sense. But on the way home, Hussein, my cousin, you know, we were driving, and he said, Amir, this is how it happens. I said, what happens? He said, for the past, 5-6 years when you talk, and talking is an expression of your thinking and your feelings, most often when you talk, things are just jumbled up. Nobody understands what you're saying because you're just confused, you have a lot of emotions, and you just become very unclear because you don't really know what you're thinking or feeling either. He says, tonight for the first time when you spoke, it made sense. And it was actually exciting and interesting to sit back and listen to. They were beautiful. And he said, we don't know why, we don't know how. There comes a point where things simply click. You try your best to understand an experience, understand the trauma, you read, you write, you think, you feel. You go to workshops, you do 1,001 different things. And instead of them making you less complicated, so you could kind of understand the stuff better, you become more complicated, you become more confused, you become more anxious, and then you become more frustrated. And then you kind of beat yourself up because you used to be simple. All you had was a negative experience. Now you've read all the stuff and you've listened to all the stuff. What was painful but simple now becomes painful and enormously complex. And now not only do you have to plow through the experience, you also have to plow through all the things you have read and been exposed to. So you haven't gotten any clearer as to what you need to do about the experience. Okay? You go to sleep, you wake up over 10 years, 15, 20 years, and all of a sudden, something about you just clicks and you get it. When you understand, it's a very private understanding. I'm not talking about, sharing your experiences articulately with other people. It's just for yourself. You understand. It's like there was a guy on Persian TV some years ago. It was kind of like American Idol, but it was only for Persians. A guy would sit, behind a desk, and he would start his show by singing. He had a very, very nice voice. And then people would call, and they would sing over the phone. And then if their voice was really, really good, he would say, okay, I'm going to let you talk to the manager of the show. They would take down your phone number, they give you a call, then you would have to fly to Los Angeles and kind of do a couple of demos. I called in a couple of times and I sang. And so when it was time for me to talk to the manager, I just hung up the phone, But I remember one time during his show he said, my dear audience, as he put it, I was married to this beautiful woman, but I was young and I was careless and I was stupid. And I thought that I could find someone better, so I divorced her. And I tried being in different relationships, but none worked. I went back to my ex, but she no longer wanted me. And it took me some time to realize my own mistake. It's not easy for someone who's Persian, because Persians, their name and their reputation are very, very, very important. They just don't come out and tell you their story. It doesn't work that way. It's not like today you go to the classroom and say, so how many of you got high before class, coming to class? And like 50 hands go up. That's not the way it works in that culture. And so if, you were to kind of consider that fellow, the sort of inner struggle and the inner battle he had to go through to finally come to accept. I don't know how it happened for him, where he simply accepted the fact that he made this grievous mistake. But even more, he came on TV, and said to the rest of us, young and old people, that just in case you're thinking about walking away from your relationship, you better think twice, because you're not seeing very clearly what you have. And should you walk away, you may regret it, and there may be a point of no return. I don't think there is a magic pill to any of this. I don't think anyone knows. When I was doing Persian traditional music, when I was singing, we have to do tahrir. It's kind of like yodeling, you know. And I remember walking in Roseville, and it wasn't developed the way it is now. Only had 30,000 people, not like now. It's, you know, like 250,000. And I would just go to this wooded areas and I would just scream. You know, from the car wash to Sierra College, I would scream. From Roseville to San Jose, where I would go, you know, practice my singing, I would scream at top of my lung, because that's the only way you can kind of open up your vocal cords, you know, so that you could sing traditional music. All of a sudden it just clicked. I was able to do it. You know, it's true that there was, you know, it was founded on a lot of practice, you know, but I kept saying to myself, when is it going to happen? You know, it's just so raw, it's so mechanical. They're not even, they're not harmonious. You know, when I sing and all of a sudden when I begin to yodel, the tone of my voice changes, and that's not the way it's supposed to be. You know, it's supposed to kind of just in harmony follow your singing voice. And then all of a sudden, it just happened. And I remember when I went to my teacher in San Francisco, his name was Golkar, he sold me his santur. He says, you don't need to come here anymore. It's finished. You've done it, you know. And I think it's one of those things, you know, it's like you pray and you knock on the door in hopes that it opens. And I think understanding is very much the same. You read books in hopes of understanding. You listen in hopes of understanding. You talk to people in hopes of understanding. You write in hopes of understanding. But you have these moments of clarity, you know, that despite all of your accomplishments, you understand nothing. And, you know, you fall into despair, because it is a sad place to be. You know, that, you know, it's something I used to tell my students when we used to go on campus, that when I, you know, moved to Oakland with all these ridiculous degrees at Laney, you know, getting a full-time job in the social sciences, it's very, very, very difficult. Okay. And I was single. And I would walk the streets, and I felt as if I'm homeless, despite having a job, despite going to the classroom and knowing and feeling that students really enjoy how ideas are being presented, despite my office being a hub, you know, the center where people would just come and go freely, they would talk about things. And there were moments I would feel very, very uncomfortable, you know, and I wanted to figure out how I could kind of stop feeling that way, you know. Then all of a sudden it clicked. I really enjoyed that particular feeling. And I would try to walk the streets from the beginning of college all the way to the campus. I don't know how many miles that is, but it would take me about 2-3 hours walking there and 2-3 hours walking back. And it's really just like anything else. It's a waiting game. Sometimes it clicks and sometimes it doesn't click. I mean, there are lots of people who go to do philosophy because they've read the dialogues of Plato and they assume that they're going to be the next Socrates. And it's just not there. You know, I'm sure there are lots of people who go to workshops to get rid of a trauma or to understand certain things about themselves or their life experiences, but it just doesn't click, and it clicks for other people. But I think if you're on a journey to understand anything, I think if you just keep on the journey, just continue being on it. And hopefully something will happen. You know, it's like when you have dreams. You know, sometimes, especially if you happen to have, you know, these really intense religious emotions inside you, sometimes you have dreams and they're very, very, very profound. You have no idea what to do with them because you feel as if your skin is going to explode, you know. And then you kind of walk on clouds for a few days because of the dream. And then time goes, time passes and you kind of miss having those feelings. And you say, okay, I want to have another dream just as intense, just as potent, just as meaningful. Because I want to, if I was on cloud 5, I want to be on cloud 9 tomorrow. And you say, okay, Amir, how did you, for example, have that dream some 10 years ago? You say, okay, well, you were sad, and you hadn't eaten, and you had read, this and that books. So what I did was I would fast, and then I would read intensely emotional books, and then I would do some exercises, and then I would stay up really, really late. And then out of exhaustion, I would just pass out. And I would wake up, there would be no dream. I say, God damn it. I did all that stuff for a dream and nothing happened, So, you want to manufacture understanding, pretend that you've understood something, but it doesn't work. And I think whenever, you become frustrated, or any of us, myself included, where you want to understand something, but it's not coming to you, and you're kind of just left confused and you feel abandoned by the entire thing. I think you should always go back to Jesus and the disciples. Jesus really, if this guy ever existed, all he wanted to do is make his disciples understand. He had such a difficult time. Despite the miracles, despite the stories, despite being blunt, they just couldn't get it. It's not that they didn't want to, they just couldn't get it. It was, wrong time, wrong place, wrong people, I don't know. And, if you kind of are reading a book, for example, and you say, okay, I'm going to be the disciple of this book. It's no different than Peter saying, I'm the disciple of Jesus. You have no idea how well you're understanding the things you're reading. I can't speak for you, but I think if I was to kind of say, I understand, and if I was to be tested like Peter, I would probably deny the things I'm reading 3, 4, 5, 50 times. No one knows how this stuff works. Consider for a moment Ouspensky and Gurdjieff. Ouspensky was, he always had this quality of arrogance to him, but he was a writer, he was a journalist, he was a student of the miraculous, as he would want to call himself. And he was, I think, late 30s, 40s, And so what happens? He runs into Gurdjieff. In Search of the Miraculous really is very much like Daughter of Fire. It's just, it's way more technical and lacks a good amount of emotions that Irina expressed in Daughter of Fire. So what happened to Ouspensky, despite all the things that were given to him by Gurdjieff? In the end, he said, I just couldn't follow him anymore. I didn't agree with his ways. When Ouspensky began to have his own group, he told his disciples, don't go to him, he's dangerous, he's no good, he's a charlatan, he's a fake. And then you have to kind of sit back and ask, Ouspensky became Ouspensky because of the riches given to him by Gurdjieff. And in the end, Ouspensky took what Gurdjieff had given him and then kind of stabbed him in the back. That's what Ouspensky did. You know. And because he was such a good researcher that we have In Search of the Miraculous, and it's written in such a nice way, you know. I don't know if Ouspensky got it or not. You know, if things clicked for him. But all I know is that he walked away from Gurdjieff. And maybe it's just a man thing, I don't know. Maybe two men just can't get along after a while, you know. You know, there is this this movie, and I'm sure you've seen it, it's called Powder. And so there is this young man who has these miraculous powers. There is the wife of the sheriff who has cancer and is dying, but she's not dying, she's just in agonizing pain. The sheriff has a brother, or maybe it's the mother, I'm not quite sure. And, or maybe it's the son, yeah. So the sheriff has a son, and apparently something happened between the father and the son that became an obstacle. They haven't talked for like years. They see each other, but they just pass each other by. And Powder goes to the room and looks at the woman, and he has this ability to kind of see her ideas inside because she can't really be vocal at this stage of, you know, her life. And she looks at the sheriff and says the only reason why she's still alive is because she wants to make sure that when she leaves there's going to be peace between you and your son. The woman dies. Sheriff is standing outside. All of a sudden his son comes and they embrace and they cry. There is this moment where both of them, the thing clicks for both of them. They realize that they have acted kind of immaturely, you know. You know, they've kind of been worst enemies for 10 years. It's not that they didn't try to make things work. They did. It just didn't work. It had to be Powder, it had to be this woman at the moment of death. The sheriff had to hear what was living inside this woman, why she wasn't willing to die. He had to be in a certain mood. He had to see his son in a certain mood. The son had to be in a certain mood. And all these different things come together in a very magical, harmonious way. It clicks for the son, clicks for the father, they embrace, the story is finished. Remove one of those components, they're never going to come together, you know. And I think that's, in some ways, that's the beauty of things. I mean, it's agonizing, but, you know, it keeps charlatans. It keeps deception out of it. No one can give you understanding. No one can claim that they are able to give you understanding. All that anyone can do, Cassie, is to create the environment, even for yourself. I mean, what do? You know, dim the light, you maybe light a candle, some incense, you take a shower, you grab your book or your laptop, you go into this room in hopes of sitting, contemplating, having some intense emotions, and then beginning to write. You sit there and you sit there and you sit there and you sit there and nothing happens, and you say, I can't write. And then you're washing dishes. And there is some music in the background. It may be rock and roll, who the hell knows? Doesn't really matter. All of a sudden you find yourself in a very unique mood. And you turn to Amir and you say, can you watch Leila for just a few minutes? And he says, yeah, what's going on? I'll be back. You go into your room, you sit there for a half hour, you sit and you write. It's finished. How did it come about? Don't know. You know, you try to create an external environment so that it could impact the way you feel on the inside so you could write, but it didn't click. And in some ways it's really, really, really good if you kind of understand that a little bit, and that in itself needs some time to kind of be processed inside you. That if no one can give you understanding, if it's something that needs to happen inside you, by you, okay? Where do you go to read in hopes of understanding? What workshop, what lectures do you go to listen to in hopes of understanding? You know? I remember one time Krishnamurti had asked me, so, do you have a question? Is there something I can do for you? I said, yeah, I have questions, but you can't answer them. You can't do anything for me. I'd like to just hang out with you, but you can't do anything for me. He says, I understand. And that's how it is. But I do think if you were to place yourself in certain external environments all the time, then your chances of being able to understand something, your chances just become slightly better. There are no guarantees, but it becomes better. You know. My parents, they moved to America for primarily me because I was such a bad student. Every night they would talk to me about the importance of education. How I should not waste my youth by doing ridiculous things. I never understood. And maybe they weren't able to really articulate their fears or their desires well. But in any case, I just didn't understand. So I continued my ways with a good amount of guilt. And then it took Hussein maybe 6 months. And when I was just being around him, I just started going to school. Why? How? I don't know. And it's something I've always told, you when we gather, which is, it's only now that I'm beginning to really understand what the importance of my time with Hussein and, all the things that he had done. I'm beginning to understand them slowly now, as I'm sure you are beginning to understand, the sacrifices your own parents made for you, and you assume that you understood, but it's only now that you're a mother. You have these fears now. They have nothing to do with you. They really have to do with the well-being of your child. You're now a married woman, and you're beginning to realize the complexities of marriage. And now you ask yourself, really, did my parents go through this stuff as well? And the answer is yes. And they have survived it? The answer is yes. How long have they been married? 90 years. I mean, that's a lot of ups and downs that they have survived, and you have a different kind of respect for them. And it's not something you could have understood, 5 years ago. And it's not something you truly understand right now. You have this dim understanding of the sacrifices made by your parents. And your daughter is right now maybe 3 or 4. Just wait. She's able to walk a bit more and be more independent, go to school, get some friends, maybe come to you one day and say, Mom, Dad, I have a boyfriend. You have no idea what they'll do then, You say, really, did I put my parents through all of this? And the answer is yes. And that's how it is. You're only again able to create an environment, whether or not the other person gets the understanding, a sort of understanding that's valuable and mature and transformative. No one knows.